Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630. WMAL.
8:07 on the Morning Majority. We've got Steve Hayes from the Weekly Standard with us. How's it going, Steve?
Morning, guys. How are you?
Good, good. You can give me your assessment of this. What is the legacy of Barney Frank?
Look, as a reporter, this will probably surprise people. As a reporter, I love politicians like Barney Frank.
Yeah.
There's so many blow-dried, made-up, well-coiffed politicians who, give speeches based on focus groups and talking points that it's nice to have somebody like Barney Frank to cover who might say something that doesn't actually, work in his political benefit or would go against the strategic advice he'd get from consultants. So as a reporter, you love people like that. As somebody who cares about the future of the country and who worries about the state of the economy, less enthralled with Barney Frank. I think that the basic legacy, every political biography that's written about Barney Frank has to lead with his advocacy for the lax lending laws and increased home ownership that led directly to the 2008 crash. No question about it.
Do you think, that sticks with people who follow politics closely here in Washington, but do you think that sticks anywhere outside of the Beltway when it comes to the housing mess and the financial collapse of 2008?
My sense is that it does. The number of people, particularly conservative activists I meet with or speak to across the country who, first and foremost mention Barney Frank as the root of the housing crisis, the financial crisis, even surprises even me. Now, I think that's slightly unfair. There were so many people who were responsible for the housing crisis, of course, and this developed over literally decades. But Barney Frank was one of the people pushing Fannie and Freddie to sort of lessen its lending standards in such a way that they were making loans to people that shouldn't have been getting loans. And he did this systematically and routinely for what I think many of us would consider good intentions. Back in the early 1990s, there were reports, some of them erroneous, that there was widespread racial discrimination in bank lending practices, and Barney Frank fought that. As the Clinton administration did. So, I think there may have been good motives behind much of what animated his activity. I just think that the results came about in such a way that to me, as a conservative, it typifies what well-intentioned laws often do, the unintended consequences of well-intentioned laws, where you can say something that should be uncontroversial. Well, of course people should have more homes, more people should own homes. It's good for the economy, good for them, good for responsibility. But in fact, getting there by pushing these lax lending laws did tremendous damage.
By the way, if anybody's interested, and I know you are, on a book-length rumination on Barney Frank's career, there is Barney Frank, the story of America's only left-handed gay Jewish congressman. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a barn burner right there.
Steve, I got to ask you about the Herman Cain story. A woman coming forward saying that she had a 13-year ongoing extramarital affair with Herman Cain. That I'd like you to comment on that. And then, second of all, the question that we've sort of been asking our members of the Morning Majority this morning is: do these moral issues matter anymore in American politics?
Well, first, having watched part of the segment of this woman, Ginger White, on Fox 5 in Atlanta, she certainly, at least on the surface, seems credible, and I think the corroborating evidence that she provided by giving, phone records and all sorts of data, having the station, the TV station, call Herman Cain from his phone or text him from her phone and get a response right away suggests credibility that maybe we didn't have in some of the other accusers. But I think, the overall takeaway from this is that Herman Cain's candidacy is over. Now, he says he's not going to get out of the campaign, but for all intents and purposes, this guy's not going to.
But what about the other issue? Do things like this matter anymore to a lot of voters? Does that inform the electorate's vote?
I think in this case we're seeing that, in fact, it does. And, who knows whether people are making their judgments based on what the actual alleged acts say about Herman Cain, the alleged sexual harassment claims, the extramarital affairs. I mean, certainly it's the case that many people in the country have had extramarital affairs. We don't know whether they're judging him based on that or whether they're judging him based on what I think can only be described fairly as his totally incompetent response to these allegations. Now, in defense of Herman Cain, if the sexual harassment claims were made up out of whole cloth, one wouldn't be expected to respond in such a way that, he wouldn't be prepared to give a compelling response to allegations that are false. But as this has dragged on, he's just, I think, dug himself a deeper hole every time he's opened his mouth, and certainly not done himself any favor.
We've kind of had a disagreement on this issue. From a reporter standpoint of view, is it newsworthy enough to report someone having a consensual sexual relationship, an affair, even if it goes on for 10 years? I mean, is that something we should be doing for all of these candidates to look into that? And if you find out that it's true, is it worth reporting?
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I don't know that we will have a disagreement on this. I mean, certainly, as speaking for myself personally, I'm not going to spend a lot of time digging into somebody's background to find out whether they've been faithful or unfaithful to their wife, despite the fact that I think it's a significant thing and that it does reflect on someone's character. To me, I'm much more interested in what this person thinks about the likelihood of Pakistan blowing up, right, or random explosions that you all were talking about earlier in Iran. I mean, those are the things that matter to me most. And in judging Herman Cain, frankly, I think he deserves a ton of credit for introducing into the Republican debate the issue of tax reform. It was incredible that tax reform wasn't a significant issue, maybe the significant issue in some respects, in a Republican primary debate in this political environment, and yet it wasn't. And he brought it and introduced it and made it a big issue. Where he fell down, I think, repeatedly was in his discussions of foreign policy and national security, and not in the way, look, you're willing to cut him some slack. He's been a businessman. This is not somebody who's been working, say at the State Department or at the Pentagon and should have sort of inside firsthand information on how this all works. I think that the troubling thing is that in the debates, he wasn't, he sounded sometimes as if he hadn't even been reading a newspaper on these issues, and that I think was a key problem.
All right, Steve, great to have you on as always. We appreciate it.